Are you ready?
Activate.
Sequence start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Shadows in the Dark. So glad everyone has joined us out there in the chat rooms over at shadowsinthedarkradio.com, as well as darkplainsradio.com. So you guys just finishing listening to Haunt a Hunter over there. Stick around. We got a great show tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. And excuse me, that was Haunt the Hunters. Apologize, left the S out there. But we do have a great show tonight. We're going to be speaking with Robert Zimmerman, who is a space historian. We're going to talk a little bit about his latest book, The Universe in a Mirror, the saga of the Hubble Space Telescope, and the visionaries who built it. So it should be a very, very interesting show. Now, a few things before we really get into the show tonight. Of course, starting tomorrow, the website will be down for about the next shouldn't be about 3 days, 3.5 days or so, because this coming Thursday we're going to be launching our new website. Now, keep in mind, this website's not going to be 100% as we go live with it. We'll have a lot of current material, but unfortunately, because we're approaching somewhere around 175, 180 shows, we have to put all of that content into the new website as well. So we're working on that, but we want to go ahead and launch the website so everyone can see it and get used to it. Of course, like I said, a lot of the content is going to be there. We're going to have a lot of new features. Now, that also means that the forum is going to be down for this for these days, those 3.5 days or so, as well as the web store. Just so we can move everything, because we are actually moving to a new server. We got to, put the databases back, all that good stuff. I won't get too geeky techie on you, I guess, but we are excited that we're going to be launching the new website. We've been working on it for quite some time now, and we want to get it out there so everyone can check it out. A lot of great stuff, So look forward to that. Like I said, just keep in mind, it will the shadowsinthedarkradio.com will be down for about 3.5 days. Now, I was looking around and I can't find Sonyador. I don't know where he's got to. So I guess I'm just hosting the show by myself tonight. And for those who are listening for the first time, I am Jeremiah Greer. We want to welcome you to the show, and we have a lot of fun on the show here, and I hope everyone does enjoy it. And I hope everyone enjoys the new things that are coming up here very soon. So keep your ears and eyes open for all of that, because we have a lot of great plans coming up. But I tell you what, let's get into the news before we welcome our guest tonight, Robert Zimmerman. Of course, I don't know. Another celebrity passes away today. That's 4 in the last week. Infomercial pitchman Billy Mays died at his Tampa, Florida home Sunday morning. This morning, of course. The 50-year-old, known for his shouting OxyClean ads, was pronounced dead at 7:45 a.m. Mays was on the U.S. Airways flight from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to Tampa on Saturday that had a hard landing at Tampa International Airport when the plane's front tire blew out. According to a local Tampa TV station, Mays said, "All of a sudden, as we hit, it was just the hardest hit. All the things from the ceiling started dropping. It hit me on the head, but I got a hard head." It's unclear if the falling objects were the cause of Mays' death. The Hillsborough County Medical Examiner will perform an autopsy that is said to be done tomorrow. So, it's just something else. That's 4 well-known people that have passed away just there in the last week or so. And a lot of people may not know Billy Mays by name. Well, of course, he shouts it in his infomercials. But if you ever watched the show, The Pitchman, I tell you, it was a great show. They really, it was a very entertaining show to watch. I was kind of hooked to it myself. What little TV I do watch, I tuned into The Pitchman. It was just it was a fun show to watch. Him and Anthony Sullivan go back and forth. But again, just another celebrity. Well, how about this? A sophisticated new weather satellite rocketed into orbit Saturday, giving forecasters another powerful tool for tracking hurricanes and tornadoes. An unmanned rocket carrying the nation's latest geostationary operational environmental satellite blasted off Saturday evening, a day late because of thunderstorms. The satellite headed toward a 22,000-mile-high orbit where it will undergo 6 months of testing. It will circle Earth as a spare and be called into service when needed. The GOES, which is being called, satellite network provides continuous weather monitoring for 60% of the planet, including the United States. The newer ones also monitor solar flares that can disrupt communications on Earth and track climate change. This is the second of the more advanced GOES satellites to be launched, containing sensors capable of providing better location data and higher resolution pictures of storms. Well, here's a cool story about it's funny, you hear some of these new discoveries which come out, like the missing link thing. It's really not new, but same case with this one here. Well, if you thought piranhas were scary, be glad Mega Piranha is no longer around. Mega Piranha was up to 3 feet long, which is 4 times as big as piranhas living today. Studies of its jawbones indicate, and lived about 8 million to 10 million years ago. The Mega Piranha fossil was originally collected in a riverside cliff in northeastern Argentina in the early 1900s, but remained unstudied until paleontologist Alberto Sion of Argentina's La Plata Museum rediscovered the startling specimen, an upper jaw and 3 unusually large and pointed teeth, in the 1980s in a museum drawer. Although no one is sure what the Mega Piranha ate, it probably had a diverse diet. Well, I'd say if it's anywhere as big as 3 feet long, it ate whatever it wanted to. Well, radio hams and amateur astronomers around the world spent the weekend bouncing radio conversations off the moon to one another in commemoration of Apollo 11 landing 40 years ago. Although they had some clear and extensive conversations, they had to be patient. It takes 2.5 seconds for a radio signal to reach the moon and bounce back to another part of the Earth, so it took around 5 seconds to get a reply. Initiated a few months ago by science buffs in Australia and the United States, Moon Bounce was just winding up on Sunday, Australian time, after a 24-hour special event that organizers hope will become annual. Well, we know a little bit about 24-hour events here, don't we? Well, Vatican archaeologists using laser technology have discovered what they believe is the oldest image in existence of St. Paul the Apostle, dating from the late 4th century on the walls of a catacomb beneath Rome. The Vatican newspaper published a picture of a fourscored image of the face of a man with a pointed black beard and a red background inside a bright yellow halo. The discovery was made on June 19th in the catacomb of St. Tesla in Rome and involved removing layers of clay and limestone using lasers. So there's a little bit of your news stories today. I hate to say, I have to say it was very hard to find some news because it is just being overtaken by all the celebrity deaths here lately, especially Michael Jackson, who passed away just the other day. So that is what I could find, dig around. I mean, it was, like I said, very, very tough. But let's take a quick little break, and when we return, like I said, we're going to be talking about space history with our guest tonight, Robert Zimmerman.
Visit www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com today to sign up for our free newsletter, join as a member of our forum, or browse our online store where you can find books, CDs, and DVDs, like a signed copy of The President's Vampire by Robert Damon Schneck, or the complete works of Dr. Gary Frick for only $20. That's 4 books signed by Dr. Frick that carry a great message. You will also find downloadable products like Mysteries Magazine and the Donald Kehoe interviews, DVDs featuring Charlie Carlson and Mr. Lobo. So go to www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com today and be a part of the show.
It's coming. Don't miss it. The Great Lakes Paranormal Conference, July 24th, 25th, and 26th on Minnesota's historic Iron Range. You'll get to meet and investigate with some of the top paranormal investigators in the field today. The original legend tripper himself, Chad Lewis, and from the hit movies Children of the Grave and Spooked, Keith Age, and from the hit show Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters International, Brian Harnois. Just to name a few of the great celebrities you will meet and investigate with. And you will also investigate one of the most active places in the world, the birthplace of the modern NHL, the old recreation building in Hockeytown, USA, Eveleth, Minnesota, home of the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, plus speaker events at the historic Coates Plaza in Virginia, Minnesota, and meet the official voice of the convention from Spooks R Us, Scotty and Wayne. And don't miss the Great Lakes Paranormal Conference, July 24th, 25th, 26th. Tickets are extremely limited, so go to www.darkplainsradio.com to order your tickets today. Again, the address to go to is www.darkplainsradio.com to get your tickets today.
Robert Zimmerman is an award-winning space historian writing articles and books on issues of science, history, technology, and culture. His latest book is titled The Universe in a Mirror, the Saga of the Hubble Space Telescope and the Visionaries Who Built Them. Bob, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeremiah, I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, and more than welcome. And this is going to be exciting. I really, this is kind of a neat little thing. Well, not a neat little thing, but, we really haven't had a guest on to talk about space history. And I think to many of us, especially in childhood, you always, I want to be an astronaut. And I think this is an intriguing topic, and I'm looking forward to this. So,
I have a question. Jeremiah, how old are you?
I am 31.
I'm curious to know how old you were during the 60s space race.
Yes, I was not born, so I'm 31. Yes, I'm
so
only 31.
To you, the race to the moon is literal history. It occurred with people. You only know it from books and movie, documentary footage. You didn't experience it yourself, such as I.
Exactly.
Okay, it's interesting because that's a very different perspective that I have, and so I write as an original source in a sense, because even though I wasn't involved in the space race, I was a teenager in the 60s and experienced it. So I have a different perspective than you do. There's no question of that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being young, there was a lot of major space exploration achievements that were kind of done before my time. Although there are still some great things, but things like, going to the moon, landing on the moon, it's like, wow, it would kind of been neat to actually have lived during that time, to see that take place instead of seeing videos and hearing audio of it,
My first book, Genesis, The Story of Apollo 8, really tells the story of the 60s space race from the perspective of the astronauts who did it, as well as from my perspective, watching it unfold. And it's hard for someone who wasn't there to imagine how much it was like a gigantic, dramatic story. This was literally two nations neck and neck racing to get to the moon first. And that literally is what was going on. And everyone was aware of it. And so people were literally on the edge of their seats every step of the way. And what they were doing to get to the moon was death-defying. One of the stories that I discovered in writing Genesis, the story of Apollo 8, was that Frank Borman was the commander. His wife, Susan Borman, was terrified he was going to die in lunar orbit. The spacecraft would be trapped there, and he would suffocate. He would just be orbiting the moon forever. And she was terrified, and Borman didn't know how to reassure her. So he asked Christopher Kraft, who was then head of the manned space program at Johnson Space Flight Center, to come and reassure Susan Borman, and they were friends. So Chris Kraft comes to reassure her, and they spend an evening talking, and at one point he says to her, look, promise you, we got this under control. We're convinced the chances of him coming back are as good as 50-50. They went to the moon thinking they only had a 50% chance of survival, and they thought those were good odds.
Wow.
I didn't know that when I was a kid. I thought the odds were much better than that. This was really difficult, and it was scary, and it was an amazing thing, and it was a dictatorship versus a democracy too. There was good guys and bad guys involved in that period of time. So that's in a sense what got me going to write about space, because I saw that unfold, the history unfold as a teenager, and was very excited by it and saw it as the future. And so I, in a sense, writing about the past, the initial steps of going into space is outlining the genesis, to coin a word, of the beginnings of all human history. Because 1,000 years from now, 10,000 years from now, the majority of human history will be exploring space. It will not be as it has been in the past. They'll look at this as the very beginning of human history.
Yeah. Now, being someone who got to watch this take place, what is your take on the conspiracy theories that are out there? Ones who say it was faked or it was some kind of propaganda, or they faked it to say they were the first ones.
Generally, I become very angry when I hear those talk. There's several points of it. It's very similar to Holocaust deniers who try to deny that the Nazis killed anywhere from 7 million Jews and 11 million people total in concentration camps. That kind of denial of plain history is offensive. I get angry too because I spent a lot of time interviewing a lot of astronauts and their families and their wives, and have actually talked to widows whose husbands died to get us to the moon.
Right.
And for people to deny this happened is like stamping on their graves, throwing garbage on the graves of people who sacrificed their lives. So that makes me angry from that respect. The other thing about it is, and this is now having to do with the last 50 years of American history. I grew up when the space race was starting, and the potential of what we could achieve over the next generation was unlimited. And my generation, not me specifically, but in a sense, yes, this baby boom generation has not accomplished that much. And I kind of look at those people who try to deny the landing of the moon happened as people who are part of that lack of achievement, and rather than try to improve their own lives or do better, they think the only solution is to denigrate the achievements of others. And that's how I look at it. It makes me very angry because it's just patently ridiculous, and that it even gets any airtime. That you even ask me the question upsets me, because it's wasting time talking about things that are just patently false, rather than talk about what was an incredible achievement. And this applies to almost every aspect of the 60s, 70s, 80s, the American space program. We waste time talking about the hoax now. We can't talk about even the great achievements going on today, because we're spending airtime talking about something that's just absurd.
All right.
I'll give you another point. 1 million people came to Florida to watch the Saturn V rockets go off. Every television network, there weren't a lot at the time, but everyone was there, every radio outlet. There were millions of people watching this. More than 100,000 companies in the United States were contractors building something. So you're talking about a very large percentage of the country itself was hands-on involved in building and assembling the program that got 3 men to the moon in '69. So to say that this didn't happen means that an entire generation of people were delusional for a period of almost a decade. Mm-hmm. It's absurd. So I find it annoying that this question comes up. I have to say that it indicates that the present generation of people who ask that question are not very rooted in reality and are not willing to look at what was achieved and maybe learn from it to maybe do better down the road.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I angered you with it, I apologize. But I
definitely, that's good. I mean, I have to say this, Jeremiah. I'm not polite about that. I think that I get very annoyed as a science journalist at the amount of bad journalism. This is not you. This is just looking at the journalism that goes on, where journalists don't ask good questions and don't really know the facts before they write up a story. And so I'm not apologetic and about being very blunt about my thoughts on these matters. So you don't have to apologize, but at least you know, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, it is no problem. I mean, we have discussed that on the show, and it seems to me that the ones who have talked about it were not of that generation, so they didn't witness. They didn't, sit there and hear the radio broadcast or see the, television broadcast. So it was very, I wanted to hear it from somebody who was there, who was a part of it in some way, and I really liked your answer that it really shows what that meant to you being there, and I think that's an important thing.
I should give you a different perspective also. I was a teenager, so I was distant from the events themselves. I only witnessed it from a distance.
Right.
But I witnessed it as it happened, so I know it happened. But much later in life, I became a space historian and started to then interview the people who were involved. And so I've now seen it from two sides. And it is, I repeat, patently absurd to claim. When you emailed me to say you wanted me on the show, you gave me your webpage, and I went and I noticed that you had a guest on recently who talked about, for example, how there this never-ending rumor about how the Soviets had a cosmonaut before Gagarin who got trapped in space and died in space. And I've spent endless times trying to point out this didn't happen. I've been to Moscow and to the Ukraine, and I've spoken to a lot of cosmonauts and a lot of engineers from that program. I know them personally. And I also know that as dishonest as the leadership of the Soviet Union was, there was a certain, if you spent a lot of time reading their press releases and their reporting of what they did during the worst of the Soviet era, you begin to get a sense of where they tell the truth and where they lie. And generally, the early days, they didn't lie so much as they would leave information out. And then later on, they would report it in detail when they solved any problems they might have had. So in the case of a cosmonaut dying in space, that's not what happened. What actually happened is, prior to Gagarin's flight, there were 5 different test launches, unmanned, or with dogs inside, to test the capsule and the reentry systems and the communications and the whole operation. On one of the last test flights, unmanned test flights, they put a man-sized weighted dummy in the capsule, and they also put tape recordings in the capsule that would operate from the capsule and be beamed back down to Earth, so it would sound like someone talking. Huh. This was just to test the communication system. Then the mission was supposed to end with them firing the retro rockets, and the capsule would come back to Earth. They had a failure in that the retro rockets fired in the wrong direction, not precisely, and the capsule was actually raised in orbit. So this capsule that that people in the West had actually heard voice recordings coming from it, gave people the impression there was a person on board, and then it gets trapped in orbit for a period long enough that such a person would suffocate. There wasn't a person on board. It was just there were these tests, the communication system. And I've talked to enough Soviet-era people to find out that this is what happened. They had deaths that were not reported to the West and accidents, but they were mostly accidents that occurred on the ground, like a rocket blows up on the launch pad, kills like 50 people. There was a case where they had accidents doing tests of oxygen systems on the grounds. One guy cosmonaut got very badly burned, almost killed him. But in terms of in space, every death that occurred was very public, such as the Soyuz 1 accident that killed the first man to fly on a Soyuz craft in '67, and plus the Salyut accident where 3 guys spent 28 days in the first space station of all time in '71, and when they come back to Earth, a valve opens and all the air gets released, and they suffocate as the spacecraft comes down to Earth, hits the ground safely. The rescue crews get there, open the hatch, and find 3 dead people. And that happened, and that was actually very public. So once again, there's a lot of misinformation, such as this story of a dead cosmonaut in space, and it's a sad thing that there's a lot of people who like to spend time on that. One of my other books, Leaving Earth, I spent a gigantic amount of time trying to understand what happened in the Soviet and Russian program, because they are a major player in this, and we should know what they've done because we can learn from that. And we should be trying to focus on what they actually did so we can learn from it. Because, for example, Jeremiah, the Mir space station that they had up for 15 years was only inches away from being a true interplanetary spaceship. And they spent decades trying to learn that technology so that it would be possible to travel to other planets. They were not building a laboratory in space. They were building a prototype interplanetary spaceship. And they understood that, the Russians. And from that, they learned a lot of things that we in the United States are now desperately trying to learn to play catch-up on International Space Station.
Oh, and yes, I definitely noticed that struck a chord with you in the in the email about the lost cosmonauts. Yeah, I tell you what, let's get into a little bit about your newest book. Is about the Hubble Space Telescope, and this isn't. The pictures that have come from Hubble over the years are just amazing, beautiful pictures, and so tell us a little bit about the book and why you felt compelled to write it.
All right. Well, let's go back in time a little bit. This is back in '93. This is at the moment I'm embarking. I'm switching careers. I used to be in the movie business, and I decided I wanted to get out of that, and I decided I wanted to write about science. As a writer, as a journalist. And so the very first press conference I actually attended as a journalist was the 1994 American Astronomical Society conference, in which they had a press conference announcing that the Hubble Space Telescope had been fixed. It had been launched in 1990. Its mirror had been ground incorrectly, so it was out of focus. It couldn't take sharp pictures. $1 billion apparently wasted because the mirror was incorrectly ground. It's like going to an eye doctor and you pay a lot of money to get new glasses and they make a bad prescription. Except in this case, you can't get a refund.
Right.
And so in '93, they sent up the shuttle to fix the telescope, and early January '94, they had a press conference. And I'm at this press conference, and they show all these spectacular pictures. And then I get to see some pictures that aren't actually in the press conference, and I see some images that literally blow my mind away. This is what we had always hoped we would see in space once we had a telescope above the atmosphere. And it was just amazing. And I then have spent the last, almost 16 years writing about space, astronomy, and science, and much of that writing has been reporting on Hubble discoveries. And it is unquestionably, I had seen it as the most influential and important space spacecraft that's been put into orbit, into space. It has changed the human perspective of our place in the universe. It has influenced and changed how astronomy is done worldwide. It has had an impact on almost every aspect of the astronomical research field in ways that it's just immeasurable. And once again, everywhere you go, in every school in the country, you see pictures of Hubble, from Hubble, because it's just it's given us a vision of the universe that we never had before, very sharp, clear, and seeing things that no one even imagined existed. And then in 2004, there's going to be another Hubble servicing mission. The telescope badly needs some maintenance, and the administrator of NASA decides to cancel that mission. And at that moment in time, I thought, there has never been a book written about the history of how Hubble came to be, and who built it, and who conceived it, and who fixed it, and who ruined it, the whole thing. There had been an academic book written, but it only went up to the initial launch, and it was an academic book, which means it was, I hate to say this, generally boring, and not focused on the human story, what people had to sacrifice to make this happen. So I said, maybe I should look into this, see if I could write it. And I started to research. There was a lot of documentary evidence from that academic book available, and I had spoken personally with a lot of astronomers and knew the field and knew who had done what. And I started to dig into the story, and I was astonished to discover that not only was it somewhat of an epic tale taking like 50 years, but a large number of people literally destroyed their lives to get Hubble into orbit. And that was not known to me before or to anyone else. And I said to myself, this is one of the most important spacecraft ever launched in terms of human history. And we don't know the story about these people. Those are people, in many ways, are heroes. They should be honored and remembered. And so I decided, let me see if I can write this. And so I did a lot of research, and I started to write the tale, and it actually wrote itself. The research took almost longer than the writing, because I had to track down people and find out the background. But it's an amazing story. There are the guy who conceived this telescope, Lyman Spitzer, wrote up the proposal in 1946 initially. At the time, he suggested putting a telescope in orbit that would have been anywhere from 1.5 to 3 times larger than the Hale telescope at Palomar Mountain in California. And the Palomar Mountain, the Hale telescope is a 200-inch mirrored telescope, has a mirror that's 200 inches in diameter. It's about, 8 feet, a little less than that. And it weighs 1 million pounds. And in 1946, it had not yet been commissioned. It was still a year and a half before they started to actually use it. It was under construction for almost 2.5 decades. And it was not yet finished when, in 46, Lyman Spitzer proposed putting a telescope in orbit that was 3 times bigger. And Spitzer spent the next 30 years campaigning for a space telescope incessantly.
Wow.
Many people thought he was crazy in the 50s, and he was a respected astronomer, head of the astronomy department at Princeton University. But on the side, he pushed for a space telescope. And he pushed in the 50s when everyone thought he was nuts. Then after Sputnik, when there was lots of money to do it, he pushed even harder, but the technology wasn't there, and even in those days, the astronomers were very skeptical that it would be worth doing. But he pushed. And finally, in the 70s, it got built. It was funded. It was funded partly because he and others spent a decade lobbying to get the funds. And he got this he basically, without him, Lyman Spitzer, the Hubble Space Telescope would not have been conceived or built. But when it was launched, he was out of the picture. He was like Moses, who did not get to the promised land because he had gotten older. The telescope tasks had gone to others. He didn't get picked for that kind of work, and so he was in the wilderness. He didn't get to use the telescope, even though he dedicated almost 30 years of his life trying to make it happen. Then there was another guy, C. Robert Odell. Bob Odell was an astronomer, head of the University of Chicago Astronomy Department. And he, in 1972, gave that position up, gave up the position of doing research in astronomy, which was his reason to live, essentially. He was an astronomer. And instead, he became the chief scientist of the Hubble Space Telescope, which is essentially a management job. His job was to help manage the construction, the design and construction of the telescope. And he started that in 1972, thinking it might take him maybe 3, at most 5 years, more likely 3. He ended up being chief scientist for a decade.
Gosh.
A manager for a decade. During that period of time, he basically lost the his research edge. He was a manager, doing paperwork, bureaucracy, dealing with government officials, trying to lobby for obtain funding for the telescope, having to sometimes be really a tough guy, getting people fired who were not doing their job properly, make enemies along the way. In the process of that decade, he made it possible for the telescope to get built. But by the end of that decade, he had made so many enemies and he's burnt out. He wanted out. Mm-hmm. He no longer, though, could get a very good astronomy job at any university because everyone saw him not as an astronomer, a researcher, as a scientist. No, they saw him as a manager. And so he could not get a really good astronomy position afterward. He did get one, but several, but it wasn't the same. On top of that, he couldn't work on the telescope itself because no one wanted him around. He had made enemies to try to make this happen. Mm-hmm. So, and his interviews, the recorded interviews that had been collected for him in the National Archives, are really sad, heart-rendering to listen to because he talks about how he feels like he was a victim of Hubble. Both him and Lyman Spitzer, Bob Odell and Lyman Spitzer, they were key players in getting the telescope built, but both of them, because of the circumstances, were not given what they call guaranteed time on the telescope. A lot of astronomers were kind of convinced to work on the telescope during its construction and design phase by given as a trade-off what they called guaranteed time. For the first year the telescope was launched, they would have first rights to all images, all data that came down. From an academic researcher's perspective, that was their pay. They got the chance to use the telescope first.
Right.
But Lyman Spitzer and Bob Odell, because of their positions in the whole scheme of things, had no guaranteed time. So when they were out of the picture and the telescope gets launched, they have to compete against everybody else on an equal basis to get time on the telescope. And of course, for every minute they have available on Hubble, they have 10 minutes of proposals, which means it's very oversubscribed. It's really hard to get any time on it. So here's two guys who sacrificed decades of their lives, damaged their careers in some ways, and they didn't even have any time on the telescope itself when all was said and done. The astronomers, interestingly enough, thought this was unjust, and those astronomers that did have guaranteed time teamed up and each sacrificed a small percentage of their time so they could add it up and give Bob Odell the equivalent of their guaranteed time. Right. He immediately called up Spitzer and said, "I'll split it with you." So those two guys did get some time, but it was the only way it was possible is if others sacrificed to make it possible. So this is what inspired me to write the story. There are heroes and individuals who sacrificed much to make it possible for us to see these incredible images and to change our human perspective of our place in the universe. And their story should be told. And so I wrote the book for that. That's why I wrote Universe in a Mirror, so that story could be told.
Mm-hmm. And that is a heart-wrenching story, and I would say now, for me, now kind of knowing that piece of the background of the Hubble, looking at those images will kind of mean a little bit more to know some, those two individuals who dedicated their life to make it possible. Because just like you said earlier, you can go almost anywhere and find images of Hubble. On YouTube, the video compilations, that put together these images are just, there's literally thousands of them. So it's touched so many people's lives.
That's another aspect of this that's important to me in writing this story, and this involves almost everything I've written. Science is not some very cold, robotic-type geek studying with his pocket protector and lab coat formulas and unemotionally coming up to conclusions like Data on the next generation of Star Trek. No, what science is human beings puzzled by a mystery and passionately trying to solve that mystery. And it literally is Sherlock Holmes. It's trying to solve mysteries. The mysteries sometimes are somewhat esoteric, and you have to learn a lot to understand the background of what the mystery is. But it still is a mystery, and it's a mystery about the universe, about something about existence that we don't understand or don't yet comprehend completely, or there's some information about existence that we don't yet have all the data, and we need to dig a little to really get a clearer understanding. And this is about people who are trying to solve those mysteries. All science is that. So I feel it's important to tell that story from that perspective, because I think a lot of people don't really realize that science, it's not just science, it's also engineering. The discovery had the figuring out how to build a space shuttle, a reusable spaceship that can go into space, bring people up, and then bring them back to Earth safely, is an exciting task, but it's a difficult engineering mystery, and you want to solve it. So there's passion behind that, and I feel it's very important to tell that story, to give people that perspective. It isn't, like I say, geeks in lab coats. It's human beings passionately interested in something. And in the case of Hubble, they were so passionately interested that they were willing to sacrifice their lives. There's one guy who ended up getting divorced. He spent this guy Pete Simmons, he spent years working on trying to get the telescope project approved and then funded. But his company didn't get the bid. He changed companies. That company didn't get the bid. He changed companies again. That company was left out of the lurch. In the end, he never worked on the telescope, Simmons. But he spent years. Ended up getting divorced because of the dedication involved to get this telescope launched. And it was, as he said, it would be really neat to be a project scientist for a telescope that sees the first light from the Big Bang. And that's how his passion was. He didn't get to do it, though, but he made it possible for others too. That's, to me, important.
Right. Now, what about the discoveries made through the Hubble telescope? What do you feel are some of the most significant ones?
Oh gosh, Jeremiah, this was actually, when I was writing the book, when I was writing Universe in a Mirror, I actually, this was the most difficult chapter to write, because the book was not about just the science, it was about the story of the telescope itself.
Right.
But I knew it was impossible for me to write this story without at least delving into how Hubble changed our perspective on the universe. The problem was that I felt almost at a loss. There's just so much. Where do you pick? What discoveries do you choose? And they are legion. And of course, I've been reporting about them since the '94, and so I know how many there are. And it's like this was the hardest chapter to write, because I went nuts trying to figure out where do I pick and choose? Where do I go? For the astronomers, there's a lot of things having to do with exoplanets. A lot of things having to do with gamma ray bursts. I can go into the science of this. Gamma ray bursts, as an example, are bursts of gamma radiation that only last anywhere from milliseconds to maybe a minute, and they're very faint, and they happen about once a day, and they're scattered across the sky completely randomly. And for decades, astronomers had no idea what caused these events. Now, Hubble, along with a few other instruments, Hubble doesn't work alone in this. Hubble was a key player in figuring out that gamma ray bursts are literally the destruction of a star as it turns into a black hole. Literally, every day, somewhere in the universe, a black hole signals its creation with a gigantic burst of radiation, and that's a gamma ray burst, and Hubble played a part in that. Exoplanet research. Hubble was actually able to gather data from the atmospheres of extrasolar planets, proving that technology would work. No one even had conceived this when Hubble was being built, but they proved it could be done. For the astronomers, though, I would say Hubble's most important discovery has to do with dark energy. When they first came up with the idea of the Big Bang, astronomers conceived this idea from evidence that showed them that the universe itself is expanding. As you look at other galaxies far away from us, the light from those galaxies is getting stretched, which means the light shifts towards the red. As the wavelengths get longer, the light changes color towards the red. The farther away an object is from us, the more the light gets shifted towards the red, the wavelengths get stretched. Think of a spring. If you hold one end of a slinky, a spring, and another person runs away from you, the springs get stretched. Well, that's what's happening with the wavelengths. The light from the galaxies far away, the galaxies are moving apart from each other, and the light gets stretched. It moves to the red. But the farther away a galaxy is, the more that light gets stretched, which means the galaxies, the farther away you go, the faster the galaxies are moving away from each other. From that, scientists extrapolated backwards, and they came up with the idea of the Big Bang. Sometime around 14 billion years ago, the universe was supposedly in a singularity. Everything was in one instantaneous spot, and it suddenly exploded. Now, scientists for decades, they have this theory, and they have lots. It's a theory. It's not proven, but they have a theory, and they have lots of data which kind of fits the theory. And based on just intuitively, when you have an explosion, objects fly away from each other. But gravity acts to slow that flying away down. You set off an explosion, rocks fly out of the explosion, but those rocks, because of gravity, get pulled back and they slow down. So scientists for many decades were arguing, well, look, we had the Big Bang 14 billion years ago. Gravity, though, is going to be acting on the Big Bang. Is everything going to just slow down slowly but never come back together, and eventually they'll just spread out and it'll all be out of sight and we'll all be alone in the universe? Or is it possible that gravity is strong enough that it will grab everything that's slowing down and make it stop and everything come back together into a big implosion instead of a Big Bang? And scientists were arguing, well, we know everything's slowing down as it expands, but is it slowing down enough? This was the two possibilities that scientists were arguing about. Well, Hubble, along with other instruments, but Hubble was, I think, the most important player in this, in the 90s, started to take data from very distant supernovas to try to calculate how much the universe, as it expanded, was slowing down. And what scientists discovered, completely opposite to all expectations, is that on a very grand, large scale, the universe's expansion is not slowing down. It's actually accelerating. Unexpected, no one understands it. To use, once again, a real-world analogy, imagine you set off an explosion, and as the rocks fly away, instead of slowing down, they start to fly away faster the farther away they go.
All right.
It's just counterintuitive, and it's not what anyone expected. I've had more than a few scientists say to me, this was the absolutely last thing we expected. Hubble discovered this. Scientists are completely baffled by it, and astronomers are spending a lot of time and planning right now trying to come up with ways to try to answer the question of what's going on. It appears, they call it dark energy. The energy half has to do with the fact that it's something is counteracting gravity on a grand scale, so it's some form of force or energy. The dark part of the name it's not dark, it's a mystery. We have no idea what it is. And Hubble that's what the astronomers consider its most important discovery. In context, now there's another aspect of what Hubble did that is very unique to Hubble. They took Hubble and decided to do what they call long exposures. They aimed the telescope at a blank spot in the sky, and actually did this about 3 or 4 times. But they picked as blank a spot as they could, and that blank spot, based on the size of the telescope's field of view, was about the size of a speck of sand seen from 6 feet away. So think of how small that is. And it's a blank spot in the sky. There's nothing there, no stars, nothing that we know of. And they then turned the telescope at that spot, and they did as long an exposure as possible. You take your camera, and if you do a long exposure, you let a lot of light gather onto the film or onto the digital CCD. And so even if you don't have a flash, you can see something in the dark. Well, in this case, they had Hubble point for as long as possible. The longest deep field, they call them deep fields. The longest one is called the ultra deep field. They pointed Hubble at a blank spot in the sky for 1 million seconds, the equivalent to about 400 orbits. About 10 days, I think, is the total time. So it's a blank spot in the sky. It's a tiny blank spot in the sky, a speck of sand, 6 feet away. In that spot, Hubble saw 10,000 galaxies.
Wow.
10,000 galaxies. These are also galaxies from very early in the universe. This is not galaxies close to us. These are very far away and very far back in time. So they're galaxies early in the universe's history. So they look strange. They don't look the way galaxies do today. Because the universe is expanding and light gets shifted into the red, if you look deep enough, the light, even regular optical light, gets shifted into the infrared so that our eye can't see it. So on these deep field images that Hubble did, it gave us a glimpse of the early universe. It also gave us a glimpse, and I like to say it literally, Hubble was looking as far as the eye can see. Because even a giant, bigger optical telescope in orbit, if it was to look longer and deeper, wouldn't see deeper. Because objects farther away, their light would be shifted into the infrared, and our eyes would not see it. So Hubble literally saw as far as the eye could see in these images, and it gave us a glimpse of what the universe was like, I'd say about 10 billion years ago. And it was not the universe we see today. The galaxies look strange. There's a lot more star formation going on. One scientist told me it's like there was a baby boom of star formation in the early universe. This galaxies start to form, and they start producing stars vigorously, aggressively, a lot. And then as time has passed, that star formation has kind of died down. We still have stars being formed, but nowhere at the pace as you have in the early universe. And Hubble saw this for the first time. So those are the main. That's a quick overview. You know, I could also talk about. I could go on. I mean, I could tell you two other things very quickly. It changed how astronomy was done. The astronomer himself used to run the instrument himself. He would adjust the telescope and calibrate it and do all the work. Nowadays, almost all astronomy, you have people whose job it is to run the telescope. Astronomers merely compete for time. They hand their observation plans to the people running the telescope, and they're the ones that do run the telescope. And then they hand the data back to the astronomer who analyzes it. So it's changed how astronomy is done. And the other thing about Hubble was designed to work with human beings. It was designed to be a telescope that would be maintained regularly by the shuttle. This was a revolutionary idea, and this is a heritage of Hubble, a legacy of Hubble that I think gets ignored and should not. In fact, it's one of the most important legacies of Hubble. One of the other stupid questions, you haven't asked it, so don't apologize. But one of the other stupid questions I get a lot, Jeremiah, is, well, why not robots versus humans? Robots are cheaper and easier, and humans are very expensive. We can explore space with robots and save a lot of money. And it's a stupid question. It's a straw man argument, because when we go to space, we're always doing it for us. Why should the robots have all the fun? Right. We always go. The robots are sent out as our scouts, and then humans follow. Well, Hubble demonstrated that if you combine the two together very well, it's a synergy. 2 and 2 will equal 6 at that point. Right. Because humans at a telescope in space will not be able to do the research very well. Humans get in the way. They shake the telescope. You don't want to have people there. But a robot by itself can't do as good a job. And Hubble's a great example. When it was launched in 1990, its mirror was out of focus. If it wasn't tied to the shuttle with humans able to do repairs, the telescope would have been a failure from the beginning. Instead, the shuttle could visit it. The astronauts could swap out instruments. So not only could they fix the problem, but they could actually keep the telescope state-of-the-art for the last 2 decades. It doesn't get... It always is at the very cutting edge of the technology of CCD technology and digital photography. It's always at the cutting edge of spectroscopy. All the instruments on that telescope are always on the cutting edge because they've been able to swap out instruments and improve them as they go. Yeah. And the synergy of that is that Hubble has been far better than any space telescope would have been if they had not tied it to human maintenance. And I think this is a lesson that future space explorers will ignore at their peril. Because when we start to go and colonize the solar system, we're going to need robots to do the preliminary work and some of the simpler tasks, but we're going to need humans there to fix those robots and to do some of the innovative, creative work that a robot doesn't have the ability to do.
Right. Yeah.
The greatest example of that I like to give is what the weakness and strengths of robots is the Phoenix Lander that went to Mars this last summer. Phoenix Lander was a brilliant spacecraft. It did learn a quite bit about the water on Mars, but the soil that its scoops would keep picking up was sticky, and they would turn the scoop over and they were trying to dump the soil into the little laboratories they had on there, a little container that they'd seal and then do laboratory work. But they keep shaking the scoop and the dirt won't come off. And they'd shake and they'd shake and they'd shake. They shook it so much they actually caused an intermittency in one of the wiring, and they had to stop shaking. If a human had been there, in 10 seconds you would have just used your forefinger, like scrape the dirt off the shovel and put it into the laboratory. It's very simple.
Right.
Robot couldn't do that. So as good as Phoenix Lander was, it demonstrates the limitations of robots and why you need to combine human and robot activity, and this is what Hubble has demonstrated unequivocally.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Bob, give us your website before we get ready to take a little break here, as well as where anyone can find your latest book there. So if you'll give us that.
Well, my website, it has a URL that is long and hard to spell, and so the simplest thing I tell people is if you do a Google search or any search on the web for Zimmerman and bibliography, those two words, Zimmerman bibliography, very quickly you'll come up with a web page, a Zimmerman bibliography. That's my web page. And you can, of course, buy all my books there, but all the books are available on all the websites, Amazon, they're available in bookstores. Universe in the Mirror right now is available pretty much everywhere as far as I know, unless my publisher's keeping secrets from me. It's doing very well. It was named top 10, it was in 2008, top 10 book sci-tech, one of the top 10 sci-tech books of 2008 by Booklist, and the Royal Society of Great Britain put it on its long list of best science tech books of the year as well, and it's been incredible reviews. I have to say, I've been almost astonished by the reviews. I think I wrote a good book, but the reviewers think it's unbelievably good. So that's been pleasant. So it's available anywhere, and it's not hard to find. Just do a search on Amazon, you can find it right there.
All right, wonderful. And we do have it linked. Your website is linked off of our website. Anyone in our chat room, if you just click on Robert Zimmerman, it will take you right to it. So you can definitely check that out. And like you said, the books are available there. Well, Bob, we're going to take a quick little break.
Okay.
And I've got some questions here from the chat room I've written down. So we'll come back from the break. We'll get to some of those, and we'll continue to talk about Hubble and some other space exploration. So sound good?
That sounds good.
All right, well, we'll be back, everyone, and because our last show, we did that kind of tribute to old-time radio, I decided a lot missed the old commercials that we played, so we're going to keep those in our commercial break mix, I guess you could call it. So for those who missed them, you'll get to hear them this time around. So back in a moment with our guest, Robert Zimmerman. You are listening to Shadows in the Dark, broadcasting live at shadowsinthedarkradio.com and Dark Plains Radio at darkplainsradio.com. The show can also be heard as a rebroadcast at ParaX at para-x.com and available as a podcast at Black Vault Radio at blackvaultradio.com and Planet Paranormal at planetparanormal.com.
We toast them crisp, we toast them light, you can tell by the taste we toast them. They're a tasty treat, so good to eat, delicious and light from toasting. Toasted.
And you know what? We like them.
Have you been wondering what gift to get that special person in your life? Then you need to visit Mountain View Candle Works, your one-stop headquarters for candles, fountains, specialty foods, and much more. Just visit www.mountainviewcandleworks.com. We make your candles with mountain care.
They sure work hard, don't they, Bonnie?
Yeah? I hate to see them work so hard.
Yeah, me too. Let's go around back where we can't see him. Gee, we ought to do something, Fred. Okay. How's about taking a nap? Hey, I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break. That's it. Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack. Winston's got that filter blend. Yeah, Fred. Filter blend makes the big taste difference, and only Winston has it up front where it counts. Here, ahead of the pure white filter. Winston packs rich tobaccos specially selected and specially processed for good flavor in filter smoking. Yeah, buddy, Winston tastes good like cigarette chew.
More than just another New Age journal, Mysteries Magazine provides a thought-provoking, in-depth look into myths, magic, and the paranormal, as well as the mysteries which have intrigued both historians and scientists from the beginning of time. So subscribe today by visiting www.mysteriesmagazine.com or pick up a copy at select newsstands throughout the U.S. and Canada. Again, that was www.mysteriesmagazine.com. Challenge your beliefs.
Are you wondering if the path that you've chosen is the right one for you? Or would you like to see a glimpse of what the future may hold? Tarot may be able to help you understand better the path that you're on. The cards don't lie, nor do they lead you astray, as they're a vehicle for messages from God, angels, and guides. Have your cards read for you by world-renowned tarot card master Scotty Roberts. To schedule a private reading with Scotty, visit www.tarotbyscotty.com today and find out what the cards may hold for you.
They'll know you've arrived when you drive up in the 1958 Edsel, the car that's truly new from nameplate to tail lights. New from the front. New from the side. New from the rear. Only Edsel has the sleek, clean line design that sets it apart from the look-alike cars. And it combines new looks with the newest V8 engines in the world, the big new Edsel 400 and the power-packed Edsel 475. It is unlikely you have ever driven a car with so much real, usable power as the Edsel. And with Edsel's exclusive Teletouch drive, you drive more safely, more easily than you ever have before, because both hands can stay at the wheel while the Edsel shifts electrically. There's even the added luxury of new Edsel air suspension that's just like riding on air, because you are. And remember, of all the medium-priced cars, car for car, across the board, the 1958 Edsel is the one that's new and the lowest price, too. So see your Edsel dealer.
Ready for some rollicking adventure? In Scotty Roberts' book, The Rollicking Adventures of Tam O'Hare, join Irish Rabbit, Tam O'Hare, and his young squirrel squire, Horatio McNutt, as they journey through Scotland of the mid-1500s seeking a small child who's been stolen by the fairy folk. Crafty raccoon pirates, conniving noble wolves, conflicted royal foxes, and self-serving religious badgers all stand in the way as their quest brings them headlong into high seas action and supernatural intrigue. The Rollicking Adventures of Tam O'Hare is in bookstores everywhere and at barnesandnoble.com. This hardcover, lushly illustrated chapter book is the first book in the Tam O'Hare series. But hang on to your sabers. Book 2, Tam O'Hare and the Banshee of Ballyglenmorrow, is coming later this year. So swash your buckle and prepare yourself for a historically rollicking, swaggeringly supernatural adventure. Visit TamO'Hare.com to learn more. You'll never trust a raccoon with a sword again.
Hot dog, Armour hot dog. What kinds of kids eat Armour hot dogs?
Fat kids, skinny kids, kids who climb on rocks. Soft kids, busy kids.
Even kids with chicken pox love hot dogs.
Armour hot dogs.
The dog kids love to bite. Picking it up on the old banjo, put on the mustard, and away we go.
When man bites dog, then do they say,
But when kids fight dogs, they yell,
hooray for hot dogs!
Armor hot dog!
The dogs
Kids love to
Hello everybody, this is Mr. G from the World Paranormal Society and from HauntTheHunters on DarkPlainsRadio.com. I would like to tell you about a website. It's called TreasureForAllUSA.com, where I got everything from knickknacks to complete DVR systems. A place where you can shop for everything and everything, and if we don't have it, I'll find it for you. That's again, TreasureForAllUSA.com, everything from DVR systems, TV sets, knickknacks, and gifts for loved ones. Come check it out, TreasureForAllUSA.com. You won't be disappointed.
J-E-L-L. Oh, the big red letters stand for the Jell-O family. Oh, the big red letters stand for the Jell-O family. That's Jell-O.
Yum, yum, yum.
Jell-O pudding.
Yum, yum, yum.
Jell-O tapioca pudding. Yes, sirree.
All right, well, tonight we're talking with Robert Zimmerman, and we're talking about space history. And here over the last few 10, 15 minutes or so, we've been talking about the Hubble telescope and the story behind it, what an amazing story it is. And Bob, I've got a few questions from the chat room. Let's, if you don't mind getting some of those in. And they're going to be a little, going to be a little back and forth here, because I just noted them down. And I'm just going to go down the line. And so first one we've got coming from Grover Cleveland. Yes, we have a president in our chat room. Yes, Grover Cleveland in the chat room, inquiring about why has it taken so long to kind of get back to the moon, and I'll kind of add to it, why do we not see a lot of journeys to the moon now that now it was done? Well, what's kind of the holdup?
Oh gosh, well that's to a certain extent what my book Leaving Earth is all about. It's trying to understand why after the space race did it kind of die off. And this is what I mentioned earlier in the show about how my generation, the baby boom generation, has not achieved quite a lot. And it's a very complicated question. It's an excellent question, but it's a complicated one to answer. And it has a great deal to do with how we chose to go to the moon in the 60s. The 60s space race was extremely successful for the United States. We won, and we started out way behind, and we caught up, and we ended up getting there first. In fact, we're still the only ones to ever do it. Mm-hmm. But we chose to do it by setting it up as a government program. And ironically, we did it to try to compete with the Soviet Union, which was a state-centralized, government-run society. And we did it to try to prove that a free society run by free individuals, not by the government, could do the job better. That's almost a quote from Kennedy when he made this proposal. But by choosing to make it a government program, we adopted the very system that we were competing with, the Soviet Union. And a government-run operation carries with it fundamental flaws that eventually come back to bite you. Because it's not competitive and because it's coercive, if a company is selling a product, a private company, and the product goes bad, they don't do a good job, people freely choose not to buy it anymore, and the company goes bankrupt, goes out of business. Others can compete and do a better job, and not only will you get innovation because of that, but you'll get better products, and they will make profits instead. But a government agency gets its money from tax dollars, which is coerced. And so therefore they're not under any incentive to do innovation or a better job. And if they do happen to do a poor job, I mean, if they can do a good job, as in the 60s in the space race, but if they begin to do a poor job, there's no corrective mechanism to put them out of business. They still get the government money. In fact, politics keeps them there.
Right.
And so over the decades of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, a great deal of dry rot, I like to say, started to develop within NASA. And you see indications of the dry rot by when things go wrong, such as both the Challenger and Columbia accidents, both of which were easily avoidable had people been on their toes in a competitive atmosphere, knowing they've got to get it right. Now, private companies don't get it right all the time either. Things fail, but they know that their job and their company's on the line if they fail, so they really work hard not to let problems linger. You can be surprised, but if a private company sees foam falling off the shuttle for 2 decades and causing damage to the tiles, they won't let that sit, or they will go out of business.
Right, yeah.
So, why have we not gone back to the moon? Well, to a great extent, by making our space program a government program, and to a certain extent a monopoly on space exploration. NASA controls that turf, and for the last few decades has worked very hard to not let anyone usurp any of that territory, private or other governments. There's lots of stories I can tell, and I tell them leaving Earth, about how NASA controls its territory. And because of that, it has worked to limit innovation. A good example I like to give is that since the 60s space race, when they built the Saturn V rocket and the Titan rocket and the Delta rocket and the Atlas rocket, and there was a lot of innovation in engines and designs to get up into space, American industry for almost 40 years pretty much only built one new rocket engine, and that was the Space Shuttle's engines. That was in the late 70s. Pretty much no other new rocket engine was built for almost 40 years, until the last 5 years with the Merlin engine built by a company called Space Exploration, which is run by a guy named Elon Musk, who was one of the founders of PayPal. And he sold PayPal for $1 billion+ to eBay and lots of money to spend. And he's innovative. He's private. It's a private company. He decided he could get market share, and so this is only in the last 5 years, he decided to develop a new rocket, a new engine, a new design, and to charge 1/10 the cost of anybody else to try to grab market share. He's competing. He's a private company. And so we're starting to see some innovation now. But why in the ensuing the subsequent years in between the 60s and today? Because government has controlled it, and there's a great deal of disincentive for innovation and new achievement. One of the stories I like to tell is how in the 90s, NASA employees who were going to give talks to the general public were expressly forbidden to use the word exploration in their talks. And the reason was that NASA, one, it didn't want to look like a risky organization. It was a government organization. And two, they wanted to sell themselves as doing scientific research. Well, the subsequent result of that, of such an order, is that there was no innovation at the agency. And so nothing happened for 40 years. The analogy I like to give, it's kind of like the ancient mariners who were afraid to go out into the ocean. They hugged the coast. You know, there'd be dragons out there, or the edge of the ocean, and you'll fall off. Well, we have been hugging the coast by going around and around the Earth over and over again. We're not afraid to go out and explore. We've been afraid to go out and explore. And once again, the reason, much of it has to do with our choice of how we established our space program. That, I hope, appears to be changing now. We shall see.
Yeah, so, well, you know, kind of talking about private space exploration, I mean, do you see that becoming a reality in the near future or much farther off?
It's a good question. I'm not sure what's going to happen, because the imperative of the American nation for the last 2 decades, sadly, from my perspective, has been to Sovietize our society. Increasingly, we are becoming like the Soviet Union, more so every day. And with this last election, it was very clear that's what the nation wants. It wants to become more like the Soviet Union. So that immediately puts a lot of barriers towards private enterprise. However, in space, the last 5 years have shown, maybe a little more than the last 5 years, the last 10 years have shown strong indications that the pressure is so much on, people so much want this, that there's room for investment capital. There is investment capital to fund new companies, and they exist, and there's actually profit to be made. And the tourism industry is an example of that. That's one of the reasons Elon Musk's company exists. It's also one of the reasons you had Spaceship One launched 10 years ago to win the X Prize, and they're doing test flights now on Spaceship Two. At least on the first stage airplane that would get it up into the air, and they're doing engine tests, and they hope to do actual test flights of the spaceship before early next year, and that's leading up to actual suborbital tourist flights.
Yeah.
So there are indications. You have right now in orbit 2 different modules of space stations. They're not really stations, but they're a module with atmosphere inside, working and operating, and there are 2 of them in orbit, both of which were designed, built, and launched by a private company, totally with private capital. And that's a company owned by a guy named Robert Bigelow, who made his money in the hotel industry, had lots of money, and he decided he wants to start building modules in space for either tourism, or maybe he could sell them to other countries who want to do space research. And he's got a business, and he's actually looking to make money as this, and he's launched 2 modules already. So there are indications that it's happening. The unknown to me is what the country wishes to do, and if we give lots of power to our government, that government then is in a position to control the playing field, and it can make it very difficult for private companies. Large government restricts freedom, and when you restrict freedom, it makes it very difficult for new players to enter the market and come up with new ideas. Those are the unknowns. I can't answer any more than that.
All right, well, next question I got from the chat room here. I'm actually going to put 2 questions together here from Christina and another one from Grover Cleveland there. One, you had said earlier that you had interviewed many astronauts, and Christina was kind of asking, if in those interviews, did any of the astronauts say anything about, seeing UFOs or things out there that just didn't seem right? And
no. I can answer that question very bluntly. No. But I can give you some other info. I can amend that. But go ahead, get the other half of the question out.
All right. Well, part of it. Yeah. So Grover's part was, he was wanting to know what your thoughts were on the possibility of life on other planets, to kind of add on to that.
All right. Well, the first half of the question is, when astronauts go into space, certain things do happen that are very strange, but that's because space itself is a very alien environment. For one thing, one of the things that does happen routinely is an astronaut could be sitting there with his eyes closed and he'll see a flash of light. And what's happening literally is a cosmic ray is going through his brain, or his optic nerve, and has activated the optic nerve, and you see a flash of light. And it took several. When the early astronauts first saw this, they were reluctant to say anything because they thought they'd be considered crazy. But after a while, they began to realize that's what that is, and it's actually a radiation issue that's going to have to be dealt with for future space exploration, because you have enough cosmic rays go through your brain, and you cause damage. So that's a separate issue. That's the kind of strange things that do happen. But none of the astronauts that I've ever talked to have ever expressed anything weird like they see in UFOs or anything like that. Space is an alien environment. Looking down at the Earth, it's hard enough to recognize geographic features from space, just because it moves so fast, and the Earth looks different than you'd expect. It takes training of the eye to even start to recognize the continents from space. The clouds make it harder. So, no, I've never come across that. Now, is there life on other planets? I don't know. That's one of those mysteries I talked about earlier in the show, about what the universe is a mystery. It's a wonderful mystery. There are real mysteries out there, and this is one of them. Do I think it's likely there is life elsewhere? I do. There's always a statistical argument. There's so many billions of stars, there must be other life. But I think I look at the planets in our own solar system and the geology that we see there. And even though at this moment we haven't found life in any of those planets, the basic ingredients for producing life are always present. And it seems to me that it's a natural imperative, and we shall see it's going to happen elsewhere. So yes, have we found any yet? No. One of the paranormal things you probably have dealt with or will someday deal with is the so-called face on Mars, Sidonia.
Yeah.
Well, I get very frustrated by that one. Here's another one, Jeremiah, where I get frustrated because it's a very interesting geological feature. The high-resolution images of it show it's no question it's a mesa, but it's a very strange mesa, and the geology there is very mysterious. It's not a artificial structure, but nonetheless is a mystery, and it's something interesting, and it teaches us something about how the planets formed and how Mars formed, and maybe it'll tell us something about how the Earth formed as well. But it's not life. And as Michael Mallon, he was the chief investigator of the company of the business that actually built Mars Global Surveyor, that took the first high-resolution images of the face on Mars. I saw him give a talk, and I asked him about that, and he said, I got to tell you, I'm not keeping anything secret. If my cameras took an image that showed a city on Mars, I'd be the first one to publish them, because I'd get Nobel Prizes up the wazoo. It would be the greatest discovery in the world. No one's going to keep that a secret. So we haven't found anything yet. There's not really any evidence of anything yet. We've had hints that it might be possible on other worlds, like Europa, maybe on Mars, maybe, though not likely. But I think it does exist. It's just a matter of time before we stumble upon an alien of some kind. They might talk to us. They might not want to talk to us. They might not be able. We might not be able to talk to each other. We'd be so alien from each other. But I think we're going to come across life at some point down the road.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, talking about Mars, what about putting a man on Mars? This is something that many, many people talk about. When are we going to put a man on Mars? That's a big question to some.
Well, it's space exploration, the colonization of the solar system, the humans' drive to go to the stars. That's inevitable. That will happen. That's a prediction you can bet your money on. When it'll happen is, of course, more difficult to answer, but it's going to happen. That's a human nature. We're going to do that. Now, going to Mars in particular, it's an interesting thing. Back in 1954, Wernher von Braun, who built the Saturn V rocket and the V2 rocket, he was a genius in terms of rocket engineering. In 1954, he wrote that he expects it's going to take a century before we get humans to Mars. Wow. We're now halfway down that century. The reason he thought it would take so long is because a trip to Mars, at minimum, is going to take you about 18 months, at minimum, probably 3 years. And he knew, von Braun knew, that to keep people alive in a vessel in space for that long period of time, and keep them alive in a way that makes it possible for them to function properly, is an engineering challenge that's going to take years to solve. One of the ways you solve that is you put humans in a space station for maybe 3 years and see what happens when they're weightless for that longer period of time.
Right.
Well, that takes time. There's no way you can't do a 3-year experiment in a year and a half. You got to spend the time. So von Braun thought it was going to take at least 100 years before we'll have the technology and the ability to get to Mars. He also believed he could put it together and do it, but he knew that this is a challenge that's going to take a long time. Well, we're now halfway down that road, and I think his timetable is very accurate. A lot of questions. Another one of those questions, Jeremiah, I get often, and you didn't give it, but this is a variation. I have callers will sometimes ask, "What about terraforming Mars?" Well, it's going to happen. Humans are very innovative. We're adaptive species. We build things. We make things happen. But right now, we have to learn how to get into space and how to live in space effectively. When we can do those things, we then will have a robust ability to settle other planets. Once again, Leaving Earth, the subtitle of that book is, part of the thing is the quest for, space stations and the quest for interplanetary travel. The only reason you build a space station at this time, and von Braun knew this, and so did Sergei Korolev, the guy who built the Russian, Soviet initial spacecraft. If you're going to put humans in space at this time for a long period of time in a space station, the only reason you're doing it is to learn how to build an interplanetary spaceship. So you have to shift your paradigm completely. You don't look at ISS as a laboratory, because it isn't. What it is a prototype interplanetary spaceship. It's teaching you how to build a vessel that can keep people alive for a long period of time. That's what it's about. If you keep that in mind, then you suddenly realize why we're doing it. And so we need to do that for a period of time. We need to also set up bases on the moon for a period of time, because that's a difficult engineering challenge in itself. The moon is close, so we can do it much easier. When you've done those two things, you lay yourself in a position where you can go to Mars. You now have the vessels and the technology to build the colony once you're there. We're not at that point yet. It's going to take time, but it's a great challenge, and it's something I think humans will do.
And to help put it a little bit in perspective, what exactly happens to the body in zero gravity, especially for a long period of time?
That is a superb question. This is something people must be aware of. Space weightlessness is very alien. Mm-hmm. For one thing, the muscles start to deteriorate. You have to exercise. Astronauts on the space station exercise a minimum of 90 minutes a day. Very specific exercises to put muscle training on the legs, treadmill type exercises. 90 minutes a day. When they get within a few weeks of coming back to Earth, they might up that to 3 hours a day. 90 minutes in the morning, 90 minutes in the evening. Just imagine. This is to get the muscles strong enough so that when they return to Earth after, let's say, 6 months in space, after about 20 minutes of dizziness, they might be able to take their first few steps. Because one of the other things that happens is your balance system goes away. You don't need to balance yourself anymore. There's no gravity. The inner ear balancing system goes away. And so you get back into gravity. It takes a while to get your balance back. Now, those are the more trivial things that happen. Also, one of the things that happens because the back isn't underweight, astronauts routinely develop back problems. About a third of them have back problems when they return to Earth because the spine actually lengthens slightly, and then it gets squashed when they get back to Earth. It causes some problems to some astronauts. In space, your heart system changes. On Earth, the gravity pulls a lot of the blood to the feet. You get up in space, it gets more evenly distributed, so a lot of astronauts feel like they're hanging upside down all the time with blood in their head, because there's a lot more blood in the head. In fact, the head sometimes gets kind of swelled, and they have what they call chicken legs because the legs get thinner because there's less blood there. These various effects are some of the causes of space sickness. About a third of the people that go into space in the first week or so will get space sick. They'll have nausea. If they move too fast, they get very sick. I could tell funny stories about the first journalist in space, a Japanese guy. He was a beer drinking, chain smoking newsman. He spent his time in bars. He gets picked to go. He's a Japanese newsman. In the 70s, he gets picked to go up to Mir. He goes up to Mir for 8 days. He did his reports, but in between his reports, they would literally hook him on a wall, and he'd hang there with a vomit bag, periodically getting sick. It's an uncomfortable environment. It's not fun flying around so much. It can be very uncomfortable. The most important thing that happens when you go into space, though, is that your bones lose density. The weight-bearing bones, especially in the hips and legs, start to become porous or weak. And you lose about this is an average number, but humans lose about 0.5% of the density in their weight-bearing bones per month. Now, at 0.5%, you do a 18-month mission, you've lost 9% of the density in your weight-bearing bones. You are risking the possibility that you cannot return to Earth because your bones will break.
All right.
A serious problem. And the solution so far to the bone density loss in space, it's kind of like astronauts, if they're in space for a long time, develop osteoporosis, literally. So it actually has it's a medical research of some importance. It could actually solve the problem here on Earth if we could figure out how to solve this problem in space. But astronauts who've been up for a long time, the Russians actually have had 4 different astronauts spend more than a year in space. And they found, through a variety of techniques, mostly have to do with exercise, but with some medicine, that they could reduce the bone loss somewhat. but they haven't solved the problem completely. The research that's been done by the United States on the International Space Station in the last decade has supplemented that, but no one yet has completely solved this problem. And this is why you need in a space station to have expeditions on ISS that last 3 years. We should have astronauts up there for 3 years so we can see how to counteract this problem, so we can make it to Mars without crumbling into dust when we get back to gravity.
All right.
Those are the basics. I mean, there's a lot more. It's a very strange environment. If you get used to it, it's obviously you watch the astronauts. It's a lot of fun, but it's not a piece of cake. It does take a great deal of training and adapting back to the Earth. I had one astronaut. This is a guy, Musayev. He spent a year in space on Mir. I interviewed him in Moscow, and he told me that the Russians found that for every day you spend in space, it'll take the equal amount of time a day on Earth to readjust. So if you spend 6 months in space, it's going to take about 6 months on the ground before you're back to normal. If you spend a year, it's going to take about a year.
Wow.
You will be functioning somewhat normally within a few days if you're in really good health, but to get everything back, he says it takes a long time. Remember, the spine changes, the bone density has to recover, your muscles have to get strong again, your cardiovascular system has to adjust. There are lots of stories about astronauts who have trouble walking just a straight line at first because they're just used to floating, and now you have to control yourself. It's an interesting environment. It's a challenge.
Well, that is interesting. All right, our next question, last one I've got from the chat room at this time, is from Night Owl, kind of going back to the Hubble. And Night Owl's asking if the success of Hubble, has it made it easier for other basic research projects? Are such projects just as hard to fund as ever?
That's a very good question from Night Owl. In the 70s, we had the big space race in the 60s. This is, once again, lessons of history, and you or your listeners might not actually have this because they weren't alive. But in the 60s, we had a very vibrant manned space program, and trailing along behind the manned program was a very vibrant research program. Some of it was unmanned, some of it was research done on the manned mission, but there was a vibrant research going on in space, dragged along by the manned program. When we landed on the moon, the scientists in a chorus, unified chorus, all said, look, it's very expensive to send men up in space, and that doesn't give us a lot of scientific bang for the buck. We send out unmanned missions, we can be much more efficient, and we can get a lot more science done. And so they sold the politicians on the idea that manned space is not that important and it's better to do unmanned. The result, though, was that almost no unmanned scientific missions occurred in the 70s and 80s because the manned program had become dormant, not very exciting, not very successful, not very vibrant. And without the manned program to generate interest and funding, there was very little space research going on. It was a desert at that period of time. 90s come along and Hubble gets launched. Hubble not only is a fundamental space scientific instrument looking at space in the optical wavelengths above the atmosphere so we can see things sharply, but on top of that it's linked to the manned program, which is one of the things that generates interest in what Hubble achieves because humans are intimately involved in keeping the telescope operating in space, if not full-time, periodically. And so in the 90s, you start to see a vibrant manned program come back. And you have Hubble extremely successful in space, making discovery after discovery in a way that everyone can understand. What happens in the 90s? In the astronomy field especially, it's a golden age of unmanned space telescopes. You have the Compton Gamma Ray Telescope launched. You have the Chandra X-ray Observatory launched. You have the Spitzer Infrared Observatory launched. You have Rossi X-ray Timing Telescope. You have, I can go on. I could probably make a list of about 100, not quite 100, maybe 50 different space telescopes that are launched in the 90s and the aughts this decade. And it's because Hubble generated interest in astronomy And Hubble was linked to a manned program that was somewhat vibrant. You had missions to Mir. You have the space station being built. You have a vibrant manned program that's dragging the unmanned along with it. So has Hubble helped astronomy and science do space research? Without question, because it generates interest, and then people are interested, and so are politicians, and so they want to get some of those mysteries answered. And the way to solve the mysteries, the astronomers will tell you what instruments they need. So you launch those instruments. If the manned program starts to become dormant again and die, interest will wane, and there will not be money for space research. Hubble, this is why the astronomers were so passionately, they weren't, the public was for this, but why the astronomers 4 years ago were so aggressively trying to keep the servicing mission to Hubble going, because they knew if they lose Hubble, they lose an optical telescope in space, they lose the main tool they have to keep the public interested in astronomy research, space astronomy research, all astronomy research. By the way, Hubble has not only generated lots of money for space telescopes, but the interest in what Hubble has discovered has generated funding for building gigantic new ground-based telescopes. I mentioned earlier about the Hale telescope in Palomar Mountain that was the biggest in the world in 1948, 2-inch across mirror. That's about what is that? It's about 15 feet. I have to do the math. It's about 15 feet across. So it's about 5 meters across. Well, they're now building telescopes on the ground with mirrors that are 30 meters across, 30 yards. Think about that. 100 feet. A mirror, just the mirror is 100 feet across. That's the telescope. And that's because there's funding, because there's interest, and Hubble has fueled that interest. Interestingly enough, Hubble, it's just been repaired, it's serviced, it looks good, it should actually be functioning for the next 5 years, at least, maybe 10 years. But astronomers know that Hubble's lifespan is limited. It was only supposed to be a 15-year mission, and we're already into the 18th year since launch, and 19th year since launch. It wasn't designed initially to last this long. It might last longer, but it could go any day. Astronomers right now are beginning to debate what to do to replace Hubble. We have no optical replacement telescope, space telescope plan, none at all. And they know that if they don't have one in space, interest in astronomy will wane. And so they need to get one in space. And so they're beginning to discuss a next-generation optical telescope to replace Hubble. And they're talking about telescopes. Hubble's mirror, they're talking about much larger telescopes than Hubble. Hubble's mirror is about 2.4 meters across. That's about 93 inches. So it was about a little less than half the size of the Hale telescope. The telescopes that they're beginning to discuss building from the space telescopes optical will have mirrors in the range of anywhere from 4 meters to 16 meters across. After the 16-meter telescope mirror, it will be, what is that? Do the math, 2.4 meters versus 16. It's like almost more than 8 times bigger.
Right, yeah.
So they're beginning to already think about this because they understand that without an optical space telescope, you won't get the interest in the research. And they would like it linked to a manned program to do maintenance and repairs, because they also know that not only does that give them an instrument they can fix and update, but it keeps the human component as part of it, which generates interest and generates funds in the long run.
And yeah, I mean, definitely going back to what we were talking about earlier, just the sheer amount of photos from Hubble, videos, compilation videos. I mean, just the interest that it has sparked. I mean, even myself, seeing these images are just, I mean, some of them are just so beautiful. Yeah. You can't help but to look at them in awe.
There's an aspect of what Hubble has shown us about the universe that also is often not recognized. You recognized it, but I want to be more consciously recognizing it. I talked about how the science is solving mysteries. We have a mystery. We wonder what it is. Hubble takes a picture of a beautiful planetary nebula. Or the example I use in my book, Universe in the Mirror, the star Eta Carina, which is a star that's exploded, and you could see the explosion still ongoing in the Hubble images very clearly. It's incredible. Well, all right, you look at that, and there's a mystery. What happened? How did it happen? Why did it happen? But Hubble also unveils another aspect of the universe that's very fundamental. The universe is majestic. It's beautiful. We live in a majestic, amazing place. And because of that, we want to see it with as much clarity as possible, to invest it within ourselves, to immerse ourselves in that majesty and beauty as much as we can. And so that's an aspect of Hubble that is very clear and important and must not be forgotten. Every image, it's why the public's interested. You look at these images and your jaw drops. And it says, my gosh. And the scale, something that I use, the star Eta Carina, it's a star that's exploding. You can see the explosion. Well, the size of that star is like multi-light years across. The explosion is multi-light years across. Little patches in the explosion are about the size of our solar system. So it's gigantic. It's almost mind-boggling, but it's spectacular at the same time. The universe is a wonderful place, and Hubble showed us that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many images I've had on my desktop background of pictures.
Sure.
I mean, it's they're just beautiful. Now, one thing, kind of, we're got about 15 minutes or so left.
Okay.
What about what's some of the big news stories for space exploration that's in the news right now?
All right. Well, you mentioned this. I touched upon it slightly when I talked about private enterprise in space down the road, and this has to do with, and I touched upon it tangentially, because the heart of the American space program still remains its government program, NASA. In 2004, the previous administration, George Bush, announced a new approach, and in many ways it was very revolutionary, because since Kennedy, NASA had not been given a clear vision for decades. And in 2004, he gave NASA a very clear vision and purpose, which was very tied to its original goals, which was the exploration of space. And that vision stated very clearly, NASA will retire the shuttle, finish ISS, and then build a new space vehicle to explore the solar system. Not just go back to the moon, that was the first goal, but to go elsewhere, and not just to go to Mars. This is a misconception a lot of people have of that vision. It wasn't to go to Mars eventually, it was to explore the solar system with no end in sight. Just let's get out there. And it has helped focus NASA very effectively in the last 4 years to achieve new goals. This is something they haven't had, a clear purpose for many decades, and it's one of the reasons that dry rot set in the agency. People didn't know exactly what their purpose was, so they made their purpose keeping their job and pension and benefits. Mm-hmm. Well, with that purpose, NASA was moving forward. Well, we now have a new administration, and it's not clear what this administration wishes to do. It literally is not clear. I just don't know. Early in the campaign, Obama said unequivocally that he would like to cut NASA's program completely and use the money for some form of educational program. Later in the campaign, he was under a lot of pressure by people within his own party to change that position because the public wants a space program. And so he did change his position, and he came back and said he's for NASA and he wants to go back to the moon. He wants a manned program, but he's not sure how NASA's doing it the right way. He became an administrator. When he became president in January, he accepted the resignation of the previous NASA administrator, Mike Griffin, who had been doing a pretty good job. There are people who disagree with some of the things he's done, but he's been doing a pretty good job. Probably the best job of any NASA administrator, actually, in decades. But Obama accepted his resignation, but then waited 5 months before he named a new administrator, who has not yet been confirmed by the Senate. At the same time he announced a new administrator late in May, he announced at the same time that he was going to put together a commission to review NASA's return to the moon program. But it took him a month to name the members of that commission, and they're not going to make a report until the end of the summer. So right now, the administration is not giving clear signals of what it wants to do. And it's taking a long time to make any kind of decisions, which indicates either a lack of interest or a strong disinterest and using delaying tactics to kill the program, kill a popular program. Mm. So what's going to happen down the road is unclear at the moment, at least in terms of NASA. NASA was given the task to replace the shuttle, and the approach they've been going at for the last 4 years is a a series of rockets called the Ares rockets. There would be a Ares 1 and an Ares 5. The Ares 1 is the equivalent to the Saturn 1B that was built in the 60s, but is a little bigger. And that would take the people into space. And then the Ares 5 is the equivalent to the Saturn 5 that took astronauts to the moon. But in this case, the Ares 5 would not launch humans. It would launch the large vessels that the humans would then use to travel into space. And the Ares, if built, would be the biggest, most powerful rocket ever launched. The Ares 1 and Ares 5 program has had engineering issues and political issues, especially the Ares 1 program. And it is unknown whether or not those programs will go forward. Well, we spent the last 3 years developing the groundwork for those programs. If we abandon them, we have to start from scratch, and I don't know what's going to happen. So it's very unclear what's going to happen to the NASA program. There are other aspects of space exploration that are more positive. I mentioned the space tourism business. There is definitely a viable market there, and there are businesses cutting metal and building ships right now that are going to fly passengers, and I hope to see that in the next year. There is also an aspect there. I mentioned Bigelow's modules in orbit. He's going to build space hotels in some manner, or space stations, private in some manner, and sell them, the use of them, to anyone who wants it. There's also, I mentioned SpaceX, Space Explorations, Elon Musk's company. There's another company, Orbital Sciences. Both of those companies have a contract with NASA. They both have a contract with NASA to provide supplies to the International Space Station. And both companies are developing their own ferrying rocket and cargo vessel to bring supplies to ISS. SpaceX, in particular, is developing its capsule, its cargo capsule, to be man-rated. What they say man-rated, meaning that a human could fly in it safely. It would be acceptable to NASA for human flight. They are looking down the road of selling tickets themselves for tourism or exploration, for making money. So there are some rays of light in this very murky situation right now. But I can't tell you for the moment exactly what's going to happen. I get very mixed signals from the Obama administration. He has people in his administration who are very much strongly linked with the space activist movement for the last few decades. These are people very pro-space exploration of all kinds, and they are high, important people in the administration. But at the same time, the administration at the top has not been clear in its signals, so I don't know where they're going. I hope that's a good summary of the situation.
Now, talking about, space tourism, and then, Bigelow and space hotels are I guess, maybe even apartments. I mean, that just sounds so strange. The
term space hotels is might be misconceiving. He builds modules that he can launch up into space that have atmosphere communications. You can put experiments in them. You might even be able to put passengers in them. Well, that module doesn't necessarily be a hotel. He has offered them to countries. If, for example, Japan wants to launch and do research in space, they can buy a Bigelow module and do it. And this bypasses a national program, which is, once again, those big government entities, which in Japan's case especially have not been very effective in getting the space program going. Well, maybe we can just go right past that and just contract the job out to Bigelow, and boom, we've got a space station. Well, he's made that offer to them. So when you say hotel, it's a misnomer. He does think Bigelow is thinking in terms of tourism. If let's say SpaceX's capsule becomes successful and profitable, it becomes a vehicle to bring people up to the space station. Now, there is a very large market. There have been studies done on this. There was one market survey that was done specifically focused at very wealthy people. And this survey laid out in great detail the misery and risks involved with going into space. They wanted to make it very clear how expensive and uncomfortable, as I described earlier, and miserable the experience is, and how you might spend all your time vomiting. You might even die. And it's going to cost you a fortune. And they were specifically asking these questions of people who had the money to go. And this market survey discovered that there's a potential multi-billion-dollar market of people willing to spend the money to go anyway. No, multi-billion-dollar market means you can raise investment capital. That's one of the reasons these companies exist right now. Well, now, the companies that are existing are mostly trying to push suborbital flights. It's only 5 minutes in weightlessness. Hey, you build a hotel in space, a module in space that people can stay in, and you provide a capsule to get them up there. Now you can go into space for several days, and you don't have to ask the Russians or the American government to go. You can ask a private company to go. Well, there's a lot of interest in that, and there is a market for it, and so that's one of the reasons the funding's there. There are a lot of people who have there are a lot of people who don't have the money who would go, but there are just as many people who have the money who would go also, and they have the money.
Yeah,
I mean, General, I'm sorry. Just as an example, we just had a tourist go up into space with the Russians, and the Russians have doubled the price. They used to charge $20 million. They're now charging between $35 and $50 million a flight, but they're still getting passengers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd have to say, if I had the money, I would go. If I had 35,
You're not alone.
50. Yeah. I mean, it's it's just one of those things. I mean, again, seeing the images from the Hubble, looking up at the night sky, it sparks so much within us, and that just, the natural curiosity of ourselves as well to go beyond our own planet.
To go where no man has gone before. I mean,
that's right.
It's a truth. That's what I was trying in the analogy I was trying to give when I talked about science itself. It's not the geek with the pocket protector. It's someone trying to go where no one has ever gone before. It might just be a laboratory experiment, but you're still doing something or learning something that no one ever knew, and that applies to almost everything. Now, in terms of tourism, for example, it is literally going where few have ever gone before. In terms of the companies building these crafts, it is going where no one's ever gone before because they're developing technology and engineering that's new and innovative. I was once giving a talk at a science fiction convention, and one person in the audience made this comment, which I have stolen and I repeat often, which is, science teaches us about the universe, things about the universe we didn't know. Engineering makes our lives better. In both cases, we are learning new things, and we need both to understand, to make our place in the universe better. And so, for the suborbital industry that's developing right now, and maybe the orbital industry as well, they are learning things about engineering, about rockets, about re-entry vehicles, about spacecraft in orbit, how to build them well, how to build them easily maintained, how to keep people alive in them in an efficient, easy manner. If something goes wrong, can you fix it easily from 500 million miles away without any help from Earth? You have to be able to design things that way, and this is engineering knowledge we don't yet have, and we're beginning to obtain it. In the process of doing that, we're going to learn a lot about how to build things on Earth better, and the result, of course, will make our lives better. In every way, not just technologically, but also philosophically. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's where this is going, and so I really do think that these innovative companies will make the world a better place, even if only a few people pay the bucks to be tourists.
Right. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Bobby, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show tonight. Very, very interesting stuff. And before we say our goodbyes here, let them know again how they can find your website and where the book, especially The Universe in a Mirror, the saga of the Hubble Space Telescope, as well as your other books. It's not your only one.
No, I've written 4 books, and they're all available on my website. You find my website, do a Google search for Zimmerman Bibliography. The website's called A Zimmerman Bibliography, and you can get all the books there. The one book that's difficult to get right now, though I do have copies, it's the hardback version of Genesis, the Story of Apollo 8. There's a paperback available on. All my books are available on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com, and as well as bookstores everywhere, Powell's. They're all available. But the hardback of Genesis is out of print, and I have copies, though my website doesn't say so. If people contact me through my website, I can explain how to get the hardback, and that's just a collector's item right now. So they're all available, and my website also has a lot of my previous writings on this subject. I was doing a UPI column for about 6 months back, about 3 years ago, and a lot of those columns are still pertinent because they were talking about the long-term history. And if I do say so myself, my predictions were correct in most cases.
All right. Well, again, it's such a pleasure having you on, and hopefully you'll come back on and join us sometime in the near future.
Love to.
And,
sure.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we appreciate it. So, thank you so much. Well, everybody, what a great show. I hope everyone enjoyed that. Again, that was Robert Zimmerman. If you have any, like I said, just Google Robert Zimmerman bibliography. You can find his website. We do have it linked off of shadowsinthedarkradio.com. It's over on the right-hand side. Just click on the name Robert Zimmerman. That should take you right to it. Now, again, I just want to remind everybody that our website is going to be down for about 3.5 days here because we are switching it over. We getting ready to launch our new website, so we've got to move a few last things to the new server, and we will go live with this Thursday before we have our Thursday night show. So look forward to that. It's going to be great. We're really excited about that. I mean, we put a lot of work into it. There's going to be a little bit of some new features. Of course, the forum will still be there. The web store will still be there. Whole 9 yards. But we do have to close it all down to move it all. So just be aware of that if you do try to go to the website. All the archives will still be available at Planet Paranormal at planetparanormal.com. So that's one thing that's not going to technically go down. So if you're one who likes to go back and listen to the archives, or if you're someone who passes the archives around to some of your friends and family, well, you can send them right over to planetparanormal.com. So, but I promise you, we'll get that website up, and it's going to be great. You guys are really going to enjoy it, and we're going to have a lot of fun with it. We're really excited about that. But, well, that is tonight's show. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, those who joined us in the Shadows in the Dark chat room, as well as over at Dark Plains Radio at darkplainsradio.com. All you are such great supporters of the show. And, of course, thanks to Robert Zimmerman for joining us tonight. Very fascinating show. So, well, we will see you Thursday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, so make sure you're there. Looking forward to it. So, good night, everyone. This has been Shadows in the Dark, where the darkness is illuminated.
Shadows in the dark.